Boxing. So welcome to a special and necessary bonus boxing pod. It's been a tough week, a bad week for the sport. Let's not mince our words. Now, I can't give you all the answers. I'm not sure anybody can give us all the answers. But what I can do is offer some opinions and take a look at perhaps some solutions. Barry Jones will join me. I'm Steve Bunce, and this is 5 Live Boxing. Barry, it's been a tough week, to say the least. I'm going to ask you first, what was your initial reaction when you heard about the drug test failure and the fight being thrown into disarray? What was your immediate reaction?
I couldn't believe it, Steve. I just couldn't. And like you think we would by now.
We've had it before
in this crazy sport, but I was and then gutted and disappointed. Yeah. And all those things ensue, and then obviously because I was working on the weekend and I make a living. I was hoping it was going to continue in a weird, selfish way for a little while. That disappeared quite quickly.
I think we all. The initial reaction was, I think we all hope this can be resolved. There's a resolution. There's a mistake. There's nothing wrong with saying we hope there would be a mistake. When Kid Galahad failed his test, when Tyson Fury failed his test, and they both received 2-year bans, we all hoped before they got the 2-year bans that there would be a resolution. We all hoped that there'd been some kind of flaw. We all hoped there'd been some kind of mistake. There's nothing wrong with saying that. You don't have to condemn the fighter. You can say you hoped the fight would go ahead.
Well, that was just selfishly, to be honest. But we all want to work. The people's going about the fighters not earning money, and the undercard fighters losing out, of course, and some of them, and also paying public who pay for trains and flights and buses and hotels and tickets, and it goes on. But also people behind the scenes who work as well, who are freelancers. They don't get paid.
Yeah.
And some of
lots of people didn't get paid that were meant to be working on.
But also some people as well have earned more money from it now because of what's happened as well. Let's be honest, some of the journalists. But that's a very
good point.
That's how things go. But it's it doesn't help our sport. I know they say there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Well, there is, Barry.
It gotta be. You can't keep. Boxing can't keep kicking itself in the face.
Yeah,
and that's the issue.
Just to put it into context, it wasn't just the Conor Benns news and the collapse of what was going to be a fantastic fight. By the way, lots of revisionist history suddenly calling it a freak fight when okay, it had some bizarre elements, but it was still a brilliant fight, and it was just a fight that people were looking forward to, which is why it sold out. But I'm not going to defend all of the details surrounding the fight because there's enough people sticking the boot in. But what I will say, Barry, is that this was just one of the 3 dreadful things that happened this week. Let me just outline the other 2. Obviously, it was finally the end of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua negotiations, an ongoing series of 4 weeks with he said, she said, some really unpleasant stuff exchanged, and the fight collapsing before it was made, which was really ugly and possibly unnecessary. But perhaps the people involved had separate agendas, both camps claiming that the other camp were at fault, which is obvious. And then buried away on the very same day, there was the story that IBA, the people that in theory run amateur boxing, the people that are just about to get amateur boxing fully excluded from the Olympics, it's already out of the 2028 Olympics, and they've made some decisions over the last couple of months, which means it will probably be thrown out completely. They decided on the same day to allow Russian boxers to compete in tournaments around the world, going against every single sporting governing body around the world. So it's been a bad week in many ways. Let's talk. Let's concentrate on what we think happened, and let's deal with what we know, and then let's deal with what we think.
Well, that's important. What we know. I think people. This is boxing. There's been so many hypocrites, standing on their boxes.
Suleiman's made a belt. Surely the hypocrite belt. It'll be hotly contested.
Long overdue.
There's a lot of old hacks could do with wearing that belt.
Let's be honest. They have. Listen, we all condemn drug cheats, and if anyone gets found guilty of taking drugs, they should be banned. Whether it's banned for life or banned for years or a few fights or massively fined, whatever it is, they shouldn't be allowed to fight because it's a danger. But you can't get on your soapbox. You can't be screaming and shouting because this was a high-profile fight when you've been involved or worked with or knowingly helped promote other people who either who we know publicly have failed drug tests or privately, which we all know as well. By the way, we're all complicit. Let's be honest.
It's really,
and we are. People. There's rumours about so many boxes that people don't stand up and say it. Maybe. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. And I think you could probably get this in all sports for different stuff. But the thing we know, but the facts, just deal with the facts. They're facts. They're fighters that have issues or of either issues with drug tests or have blatantly failed drug tests and been allowed back into the sport. And some of these people screaming about this fight haven't screamed when these other boxers have continued to fight.
Absolutely.
And I understand that because we all need to make a living.
Absolutely.
But but we all have to let's keep the same energy for everything.
Yeah.
Or for none. We either just include it all or we condemn it all.
Now, Barry, well said. You've perfectly captured the way I feel as well there. Now, we know that the drug in question is called clomiphene, and it's a fertility drug, and it could be used as a massive masking agent for more serious abuse. Okay, that's what we know. We know that he didn't fail a UCAD test for that drug, which is banned. Don't worry. But we know he failed a VADA test for that drug, where it's also banned. Now, VADA themselves, that's the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, they cannot hand out suspensions. What they do is they're a testing authority. Now, this is what we don't know. And in fact, you might want to almost take these down as a list of things that we don't know. We don't know exactly when he took it. There are 3 possible dates which people are using as though they were rock solid. One is the end of July. One is the end of August. One is the 1st of September. So we need, let's put this down as maybe one, we need a definite date of when he failed that particular test, and if he took a UCAD test anywhere near that date, which could lead to some sort of discrepancy. Because if he failed the test on, let's say, on a Tuesday, but on the Monday he'd cleared a test for UCAD for the same sample. Let's assume that. Let me just push on a little bit more with this, Barry. We need to know when the actual test took place, and we need to know what drug test he had either side of it. Okay, and what we then need to know is when were people told? Now, we understand it was either the 23rd of September or before the 23rd of September, which leaves an awful long time to when this became known, when a British national newspaper made the revelation on Wednesday. So there's just a couple of simple things we need to know. Now, we don't know either of those 2 things solidly. By the way, it's just you need a full timeline here if you're going to investigate something as serious as this.
I would say that the people who are investigating it who are going to make rulings on whatever it is, whether it be legally or just for the boxing board of suspensions or whatever, or exclusions, I don't know. But for the rest of us, we don't need to know when he took any test. That's to be honest. We need to know if a test was taken, if it was passed or failed, which it seems it was failed, and that's all we need to know. I don't see we need to know any more. And what we need to know is why is there any. What makes you pass one drug test against one organisation's drug test to another organisation's drug test?
Absolutely, Barry.
Did one pass and fail because there was a different time? That's where the time thing comes in for me. And also, why did the British Box Board only go with UCAD and not with VADA? Yeah. And why did you have a VADA test if you don't need to have a UCAD test?
Well, both boxers insisted on the VADA, which cost about $34,000 for the series of testing. But they also knew that UCAD didn't recognise it, which creates this odd anomaly. Why would you have and pay for a testing system which you're not really going to adhere to? Which is, I mean, the amount of questions here. Are absolutely mesmerising. I'm going to try and throw this on, but before we do that, Tony Sims, who trains and has worked with Conor Benns for 7 years and has crafted a raw novice into a quality fighter. he issued a statement saying, "Look, I have no idea what this is. I want to get to the bottom of this." And at the same time, Nigel Benn released a little clip saying the exact same thing. In fact, using the same kind of language. Said, my son, we're totally shocked. It's a 10-week camp, a brilliant camp. He's a clean athlete. He's a brilliant trainer, and we will get to the bottom of it." Now, the behind-the-scenes chat, because I was over at the hotel for 5 or 6 hours on the day when the press conference was finally cancelled, and then the fight was called off, and Eddie Hearns and Calasawaland, the co-promoters, delivered a sort of 3-minute chat, but they wouldn't take any questions from any of the gathered media of any sort. One of the things I picked up there was the suggestion that people have known about this for a very long time, not just since the 23rd of September. Again, it was only something I picked up, and that there was that Conor Benn was trying to find out what this was all about. Now, by saying that, it's not, we're not trying to exonerate or clear Conor Benn, because he's failed a drug test, okay? That means he has failed a drug test. It's that simple. And the B sample becomes something that people like to use. It's like a smoking gun. If the B sample will be exactly the same as the A sample. There have been instances in history when the B sample has been different, but then what's happened, there's been a problem with the way the B sample was stored immediately after it was taken, and has been contaminated from the sample being sealed to the sample being opened for testing. Clear example. There's no suggestion here that Conor Benn's B sample went in the wash with a load of other stuff and came out of the wash and ended up. It's not going to be. So it's not going to be different. So don't hide behind B samples. We're not doing B samples. We need to know, if everybody knew on September 23rd, why did it take until the morning of the 5th, when it appeared in a national newspaper, for us to know? And if there was a plan of action, and if involved in that plan of action was some integrity and some honesty, we need to know that. Those, as I said at the top of the show, those are questions we can't give the answer to.
So what date was it?
23rd of September.
Well, it seems a long time away, but actually, when building to a fight, that's quite close. So you would tend to think that, let's presume that, and that's what Conor's saying is that I never took anything. So maybe I don't know.
Which he said. Conor Benn, sorry, Barry, for interrupting again. It's one of those kind of shows. Conor Benn has said, "I'm innocent. I've taken nothing. I have no idea how this is in my system." So, he has said that.
So with that in mind, I would imagine we need to find out why he's failed this test, and then you got the UCAD test. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they had the UCAD test to go, well, let's do another test. They should have done another VADA test, maybe. But maybe they already did. We don't know this. But to go, well, how come this has happened then? What have I done? If he generally hasn't, and he believes he hasn't taken anything, then it's gone to his system somehow. It's there, clear as day. So find the reason why. Or the other side of the story is not so. It's not so upstanding. That's the problem, and that's where people.
So the other side of the story is that he's a cheat, and he's knowingly used this to mask something more.
And they do everything they can to hide it, yeah. Which again, I would think, though, and especially closer to the fight now, with the way the fight was maybe going ahead, and and promoters and everyone around the fight trying to keep it alive. That's a panic. I think that's the natural jerk reaction. I think, where you just think, because all the investment, and it was such a big occasion, everyone wanted to see the fight, and it cost millions to maybe get going. And I think everyone just panicked and wanted to get it ahead by all costs. You almost, and when you're in it, and we know that, we understand, when you're in it, you almost, if you take a step outside, then they all would have just, all the promoters and everyone involved would have just said, this can't go ahead. But when you're immersed in it, you're just thinking...
When you're in that bubble, that lunatic, crazy bubble...
We got to get this fight going. We got to get this show, keep it going. And that's what boxing is like. So I think, a little bit of naivety there, that everyone just thought, we got to get this going somehow. No, he didn't pass. He failed. He passed the UCAD test. That's all the British Box Board have asked for. That's all they should be concerned with. I think that seemed the argument. Yeah. And on paper, that argument sort of half stands up. Yeah, but morally, and he made the right choice. Morally, it wouldn't be right, because if sport's dangerous enough. If something happens, no one can forgive themselves. Yeah. And anyone involved. And I mean, even from us talking about it, we would all feel a slight of guilt.
You're absolutely spot on. So So that asks the question, the instant question, one we don't have answers to, is if everybody knew on the 23rd, and then they suddenly only start. There's only the panic once the newspaper report hits, and there's this bizarre sequencing where Eddie Hearn and Sauerland issue a statement saying the fight's going ahead at 12:29. And the British Boxing Board of Control at 2:06 issued their statement saying that the fight's prohibited as it is not in the interests of boxing. And we now know for a fact that the board had told the promoters of their intention to issue that release. We know that either came in the morning of the 5th or on the night of the 4th, when everybody was made aware of the impending newspaper article. So the question here is, if that's the case, if that's the case, why did Matchroom and Sauerland issue that statement saying we're going to go ahead with this, knowing full well that the board were about to say we're going to prohibit this fight?
But again, I think they probably regret that now, I would have thought. But again,
I'd like to think so.
I think they do, definitely. But I think when you're in it, when you're doing it, the whole focus is to get the show up and running. So they almost don't think, like, because boxing's literally, it's a cruel business inside the ring. Possibly.
Crawler outside.
I would say it is, Steve, yeah. So, they always got their gloves on, their gum shield in. So I tend to think that they literally are just thinking, we'll just, any problem comes to us, we find a solution and we move on.
Now, what you've highlighted there, Barry, without me even asking you to highlight it, is that not only did Eddie Hearn and Kalle Sauerland have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but it appears, well, it doesn't appear, the board also had a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. So if the board knew about this on September 23rd, what made them suddenly, on the night of the 4th, decide to put together their memo, which went out, their statement went out on Wednesday the 5th? And what made them do that was they were clearly alerted by the newspaper. So another question here that we won't be able to answer is, if the board knew on the 23rd of September, and Eddie knew on the 23rd of September, and Kalle knew on the 23rd of September, why weren't they putting together a cohesive plan, a strategy to deal with the inevitable leaking of the finding? Because VADA only exists because it finds drug cheats, and it's good at doing it. Now, the only reason we know it finds drug cheats is because we always get the story in the newspaper. That's VADA. They'll deny it, don't worry. But VADA, everything leaks from VADA, and that's fine, because that means that everyone gets to know about a certain man or woman who is cheating or has failed a drug test. I've got no problem with that. I wish it didn't have to be leaked. I wish that you failed a drug test on the Tuesday, you were notified on the Wednesday, and there was a press release on the Thursday. That's what I hope. That's what I wish. But it doesn't work that way. I mean, if you look back on Tyson Fury's case, it ran on for, some people didn't know about it for 2.5 years. We heard rumours. We didn't know about it for 2.5 years. And it's the same with Galahad, by the way. These cases run on and on. So we need to know why the board didn't put in place some kind of action between the 23rd of September and the morning of the 5th, and we need to know why Eddie and Kalle didn't put in place some kind of action, rather than just being stubborn and obstinate and saying, yes, we're going to go ahead with a fight.
I think this might be the reason.
I hope so. You'd be a magician if you can pluck this one out of the hat, son.
Here we go. The British Box Board Control only use UCAD, as far as I believe, for the test for drug testing. So he's passed the UCAD test. So they might originally just say, we don't need to know about what happened before with the testing company we don't use. If he passes the test from UCAD, then he's good enough to fight. But I don't know. I'm just saying that might be the reason. All of a sudden, then when the story comes out, they go, well, because they didn't say he's banned or he's suspended. They've said for the greater good of the sport, or whatever their word was.
The exact wording, hold on, my son, is as it is not in the interest. Of
there you
boxing.
Go. Because no, it's shining a bad light in boxing. I understand that, but they still haven't suspended Conor Benn because I guess they're on their terms, their terms of their licenses, that he hasn't failed a test from them.
Well, sadly, Barry,
Maybe.
the flaw in your theory there is that
there's loads of it.
If the board do not recognise VADA and choose not to recognise VADA, and they could have just ignored the whole thing and said, "But we don't recognise them, so we don't care what they've."
Well, I think
they've obviously taken it on board.
But that's why it's taken so long, because maybe that's what their initial stance. And again, I'm just surmising it. I haven't got a clue, of course, and nobody does. I think that's the issue with this now. All we know is that there's been an adverse findings in a test, which pretty much means he's failed the test. We know that much. And in the end, the show everyone did the right thing, and the show was cancelled. I mean, the fact that people thought about the show going ahead is not great, but it didn't go ahead.
It's inevitable.
I don't know why people make a massive deal about it. I think
I'm on your side.
I think the press and people have jumped on board. Make a deal if Conor Benns failed a drug test. Make a deal about that. I understand that the kid's made a mistake, like we all do, or maybe he hasn't made a mistake. He's just got caught. We'll find out. But either way, so he's failed a drug test. We focus on that. We wait and find out the degree of cheating is. The cheating is cheating in my book. But you had some brilliant guy on your podcast in the pandemic. He used to be here before, grey-haired guy, great commentator. He went off the TV now. But he did a lot of athletics, Mike Costello.
Yep, all the time.
And he explained on this BBC podcast back a few years ago about it wasn't just as simple as taking drugs and cheating.
Absolutely.
There was massively degrees of it.
Absolutely.
Because of the athletics.
And I spoke to Costello yesterday, and we talked about trace amounts and what that can mean, and tiny amounts.
Yeah.
Of course, Dillian White, a couple of his tests were, one of his failed tests, if I'm not mistaken, was tiny trace amounts. We understand that this is a trace amount. Whether it's a small trace amount, a tiny trace amount, we don't know. But we know because none of us have seen the official documentation, which would be really good. So Barry, let's try, if we can, to throw this forward, and let's keep this really sharp and bitey. What needs to happen now? What would be? I'll give you first go. What are your 2 or 3 bullet points as we leave the debacle of Thursday's delayed conference, where we waited forever, not knowing what was going on? It was a dark day for boxing and a bad day for the way the media is treated and handled. If I tell the truth, and listen, and I'm a fan of lots of people that work in that business, but we were kept waiting and waiting. When we were finally led upstairs to sit down, we were told as we sat down, no questions. They'll take no questions, which is bizarre because there were so many answers.
It's bizarre.
So Barry, let's go back. Let me ask you, give me your 2 or 3 bullet points going forward that will help us all.
Well, I think the major thing for me, is obviously, bans and suspensions and all that stuff, and cheats should be dealt harshly. That's the truth. But UCAD and VADA should talk. That's what I think.
That's a nice one. So that'd be bullet point 1. Good one.
Just because we need to why can't they work together and say, listen, I know they only deal with you, UCAD, but he's had a VADA test because he's with the WBC or in their enrollment scheme. So can we all work together and sort of sub out the work, if you like, and then they go, okay, fair enough. And they said the findings are, we rubber stamp VADA's findings, UCAD, and in the British Box Board with a suspended Conor Benns licence immediately, I would imagine, and all this would have happened in September. I bet you that probably would have been the case. Yeah. Suspended until he gets to, because like anyone, you're not until you're proven guilty, you're not guilty. Yeah. So he has.
But Conor's been roundly condemned as a drug cheat, and he should go to the Tower, have his head chopped off, and serve a lifetime ban.
And this is my issue with we all want a test to come out and everyone be exposed straight away. Of course we do, but like anything, someone gets arrested for a certain crime, they don't mean they've done it. They've just been arrested for it. Yeah. They might not have done it, but then if it goes public, it's irrelevant whether they've done it or not. The perception is they are that criminal for whatever crime they've been accused of.
So for Conor to clear his name, he needs to clear it.
His name can't be cleared now.
No, but for him to clear his name, he needs to clear his name. Because Conor Benn, Nigel Benn, Tony Sims, and everybody in the Conor Benn business, of course, is saying, I'm innocent, I'm clean, I'll prove my name, we'll get to the bottom of this. And then everybody looking on from the outside, all various stratas of the media and rival promoters, they're saying, get him off to the Tower. There's a massive divide. In fact, I spoke to Matt Christie this morning, only via WhatsApp or whatever, and I said to him, this feels different. This doesn't feel like the B sample is going to vanish like it has in the past. Yeah. This doesn't feel like we're going to show up at the next fight and not mention a 2-year ban, which is what we did with Tyson Fury, which is what we did with Kid Galahad, who, by the way, Kid Galahad's excuse. What was Kid Galahad's excuse? Do you remember? His brother tainted the bottle out of envy. And what was Tyson Fury's excuse for Nandrolone? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
He ate uncastrated wild pigs. Okay, but
and Canelo's was he had
contaminated beef. So basically, the point I'm making is that those guys, after their 2-year bans, they got back in the ring, and we couldn't stop asking them how soon it was before they were going to fight for a world title. Now, here's the thing: let's say Conor Benn gets a 2-year ban, and let's say it's backdated to whenever this test was taken. So he could already be 2 months into his 2-year ban. So do you think in 22 months when Conor Benn comes back, and I'm using that in quotes, assuming he gets a ban,
it feels different.
It does. That's the point I'm making.
It feels different that even if it comes out to one of those scenarios, actually, when he was getting his supplements mixed up and made, they were using the same bowl to do some other, performance enhancing drugs, and it got tainted. That's why it was only a trace. So he didn't actually take it. I doubt that would happen. Just say, for argument's sake, that something like that.
That was their reason.
Some stupid
if
like
that was the reason.
I think something like that happened with a UFC fighter sued and got his license back, I think, years ago for something similar to that. And then it's irrelevant because now this has been so intense that the cloud's on him forever. It's just how he deals with it now. But if he has taken it, knowingly taken it, and you can never prove that because if he keeps saying I knowingly didn't take it, but if they decide he has knowingly taken the drug, then he needs to be dealt with harshly because and unfortunately, like any bigger name, you should be made an example of.
And I wonder, Barry, this is a question for any chemists listening, because we've got yoga teachers, we've got blind journalists, we've got all sorts of people listening to the pod. This is a question in case we've got any chemists listening. If we know the drug is called clomiphene, so we know that. But can you? And I'm asking the chemists out there, can you determine whether the clomiphene positive test that Conor Benn took came directly from the fertility drug, or was it clomiphene in another property? I wonder if they can do that kind of stuff. They can. I mean, I've got a relation. I've got a relation that's getting cancer treatment, and I've seen the bloods. When you see the blood tests, it's about 17 pages. It's like a computer readout from the 1970s. So they can tell everything. So can they tell if that particular negative test is from, let's put it as pure clomiphene, i.e. from a fertility drug? And there are some questions. Yeah. And as I said at the top of the show, which seems like about 2 days ago, I wish I could turn time back 2 days.
Like I say, we're all complicit with allowing people who fail drug tests to continue their careers, and we are. We're also complicit, and we are sat here now, with the scaremongering and the surmising and a lot
guessing.
Yeah, where we don't know.
Pointing the finger.
It's just it is self-righteousness. That's right. You just
contradiction.
You describe yourself to a T, Steve.
Thank you, darling.
But I just feel that it has to be talked about, of course, as well, and this will run for a long time. But we don't know. Well, all we know is that there's been a problem with this test. Yeah. And the fight rightly could. Everyone saw sense in the end. Let's bear that in mind. In the end, when it comes down to brass, ultimately, everyone did the right thing.
Eventually.
It was relevant eventually, as long as the right thing's done.
Yeah.
As long as the right thing's done. Just because it wasn't immediately, people just stand up and go straight away and go. But bear in mind, these people had invested their whole careers, possibly, and millions in this. So he's just to say people, everyone just say you should have just said cancel the fight straight away, because it's not just them. Or say for Eddie Hearns, if we use Eddie Hearns, it's not just Eddie Hearns' life, money, career, or whatever, reputation. But and I'm not saying he is thinking, but there's other people involved. There's his staff. There's people like me, subcontractors. There's there's the boxers on the undercards, because it might be a case, does the show go ahead like the Lee Woods, when Lee Wood got different circumstances, when Lee Wood was top of Nottingham and he injured his hand, the show went ahead without him because there was a decent undercard. There was a decent guy to go top of the bill. This one, there wasn't a big enough name to top of the bill in anywhere really. In who went to a small event, in who went to the Indigo next door. But that maybe would have been a thought. So.
That happened once with a Golovkin fight. Do you remember when he was meant to be on the Golovkin? So he was meant to be on the Vladimir Klitschko, Derek Delboy Chisora bill, if I'm not mistaken. That fight got cancelled at the last minute, so they moved out of like a stadium in somewhere like Hamburg into a little hall. Like Hamburg.
Wow, yeah.
I think that's what happened. Then he defended about his second defence.
So maybe all these things were thought of, but ultimately they were still probably trying to get the fight to go. Yeah. That's the truth of it. And any other promoter would have done the same thing. Yeah. That's the truth. But ultimately, I like to think, as they did, every other promoter in the world would have ultimately said no.
Barry, you know what? We could go on forever, but we have to, in my opinion, draw some kind of line under what has been a bad week for boxing, a dreadful week for poor Chris Eubank Jr., who's come out of it like a true hero. Not a great week, really, for the Bull. Not a great week, really, for the promoters, although, as Barry and I have pointed out, as we tried to point out in this pod, we get caught up in the bubble. It's easier to understand some bad decisions when you're caught up in a bubble than it is when you're on the outside throwing bombs at that particular bubble. And of course, it's been bad for Conor Benn. The optics, as they say in the trade, are not good. So it's down really to if Conor Benn can try and clear his name. If he can try and clear his name, even if he does clear his name to a degree, it's going to be a very long battle and struggle for that young man to get back anywhere near our hearts and minds. And there are people that will say he shouldn't get back anywhere near our hearts and minds. Well, let me just tell you something. The most popular fighter we've got at the moment is a guy that was banned for 2 years, Tyson Fury. And people said some of this stuff, but maybe not as much of this stuff about Tyson Fury. Now he's loved and adored. Let's get that absolutely right. I'd like to have a catchy and piffy ending for you, something to send you off on the rest of your day with a little bit of uplift, but I can't really because it's been such a dreadful week. It's been an absolute hellish week for boxing. I just hope that next week, as we build up to the delayed, cancelled, for legitimate reasons, the women are in town next week at the O2. It will be packed. It will be heaving. Claressa Shields against Savannah Marshall. Oh, what a fight that is. Alicia Baumgardner against Michaela Mayer. What a fight that is. What a fight. What a night that will be. Boxing will get itself back on track. But from Barry Jones and from me, thank you for listening. I know we've probably raised more questions than we've answered, but that was always going to be the way. Thanks very much indeed.
Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.